Boston Celtics made a pair of fairly surprising moves on August 5th yesterday by trading away Georges Niang and then signing Chris Boucher. And yesterday's video was kind of just breaking down the breaking news aspect of all of it, what we can kind of expect from these two moves. But we're going to get a little bit deeper of a dive today on why these moves were made. We're going to talk a little bit more about what Chris Boucher can provide to the team and why these moves were really, honestly, in my opinion, so good for the Boston Celtics and smart by Brad Stevens. To recap on what exactly went down yesterday, the Celtics traded away George Niang and his $8.2 million expiring contract to the Utah Jazz for, literally nothing on their salary cap books. They acquire R.J. Lewis Jr., but he's on a two-way contract, so that does not count against their salary cap and their luxury tax and all the aprons that they've been up against all offseason and really the past two seasons. And then they went out and signed Chris Boucher to a one-year, $3.3 million contract. And I guess I should also mention that they had to attach 2 second-round picks to make this deal happen. Obviously, it's not a sign-and-trade per se. They just went out and made a subsequent move thereafter. So these are just the moves that are all in favor of the Celtics there. And we also heard what the protections, or I guess I should say the specifics on the second-round picks that were sent away in that deal. Shout out to Jake Fisher for getting this on Twitter earlier today. So the 2 second-round picks Boston is sending Utah as part of the George Niang, R.J. Lewis deal are their 2027 most favorable between the Celtics and Magic, and the 2031 most favorable between the Celtics and the Cavaliers per source. So it's marginal, I'm sure, by 2027 when Jason Tatum is back and all that stuff, and especially by 2031 when JT and JB will be in the latter stage of their career. These second round picks and the positioning of all of them, they won't matter all too much. And I know some of the Celtics fans out there were kind of mind-boggled by the trade when you look at it from an on-court perspective. Of course, George Niang is the more veteran, more accomplished, and more productive player than R.J. Lewis is going to be this season. But there is a bigger picture to this story, and we're going to dive into it in just a moment. But first, though, make it known down in the comments section, or I guess on this video in general, if you believe in Brad Stevens. Go down below, scroll down, hit that big thumbs up icon like today's video. I'm trying to set a record for Brad Stevens today because I legitimately believe in this guy like no other. He's one of the smartest guys in the basketball world, and I want to break a record for him on today's show. So let's do it. The most likes that we've gotten on a video in the calendar year of 2025 is 672. On today's show, can I get 673 diehard C's fans to go down there and like the video? Everybody who goes down and watches today's show should believe in Brad Stevens, so go hit that thumbs up icon. All right, let's get into it. The Celtics, as it stands right now, have still one roster spot left open. Obviously, with the R.J. Lewis going into a two-way slot, that doesn't take up an active roster spot. So they just swap Chris Boucher and George Niang here. And now, Bobby Marks of ESPN had Boucher actually lined up in the Celtics starting five, replacing George Niang. Now, obviously, this is not set in stone or anything like that. Celtics haven't come out with who they think is going to be in their starting five. But let's just talk about it from a financial standpoint at this point. The exceptions that the Celtics have on their books now, if they're getting closer and closer to that first apron, they have a taxpayer mid-level exception that they could have used, a second round, the vet mins. They have some trade exceptions as well. In that Niang deal, they created an $8.2 million trade exception. In the Holiday deal, they created a $22 million trade exception. Actually, I believe that was the Porzingis deal. But you look at the roster as it stands right now, it's not that great. And I think Brad Stevens knows that as well. That's why I believe in him. There is a vision here. Your best player on your roster is out for the entire season. So it makes sense to do a soft tank. This isn't a total, we're shutting down Jaylen Brown, we're trading away Peyton Pritchard, we're just blowing the whole thing up. It's not that kind of tank. It's a soft tank. He knows that the roster is not going to be in position that it needs to be in order for them to contend where they were just this past season or the year before when they won the title. So then you kind of just roll with the punches a little bit, fill in the gaps where you can, and just see how bad or good this roster can actually be. And it's all about the finances. Chris Forsberg of NBC Sports Boston really justified the trade. If you guys aren't buying what I'm selling right now, hear it from a guy who's around the Celtics all year long. He says this: it comes down to financials. I know that's frustrating, and I know people get upset about it, but if we're just being honest about where this season is, and I will still die on this hill, I think they're going to be way more fun than people think. I think they're going to be way more competitive out of the gates. I don't know where it's going to go, but I do think the most important thing is long-term, making sure this team is able to kick it back into championship mode when Jason Tatum is healthy. Might as well get the books right. Might as well potentially get under that tax long-term. They're about $12 million away now after the Boucher deal as well, and there are pathways to get there at some point this season. And now all of a sudden, you're out of the repeater tax. And all of a sudden, you can spend bigger to build a new championship sort of nucleus around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown when it's time to go. all offseason long, the number one priority since Tatum has gone down with the Achilles. Because if he didn't, there would have been some people around the organization and in the front office that may have been willing to go at it again next year with this core. Run it back one more time to see if they can get 2 rings out of this unit. But JT goes down with a major injury, and that just wasn't all that feasible at that point. Even if you still had Porzingis and Holiday and Horford and Kornet, there's no telling that the Celtics make it out of the Eastern Conference next season. So might as well clean up the books while your ceiling is capped at this point. The Celtics, before making the Boucher deal, they saved over $43 million by trading away George Niang just due to the luxury tax penalties that they will get. Now, I believe the whole total savings now after Boucher is $30 million, flat $30 million in luxury tax savings. But they're still pretty close to being out of the tax entirely, like Forsberg said. If you blow up those numbers that were on Bobby Marks' page a little bit earlier, they're only $4 million over the first apron at this point. So then they'll be in like just like regular luxury taxpayers if they can clear $4 more million. And then if they want to get under the tax entirely, it's possible at this point. There is a way for the Celtics to shed $12 million more before this season is over. And a player who has not yet been introduced by the Celtics could be on the chopping block. We've heard since the trade was made back in late June that the Celtics are quote-unquote actively shopping. Yeah, they're not going out there and making a bunch of offers for teams, but they are definitely listening to calls, and whatever market is out there, they are going to listen to Anfernee Simons. And you want to know how I know why? They haven't introduced him to the media yet. Yes, Brad Stevens has talked up Anfernee Simons' fit on this team and what he can provide on the basketball court. But the media haven't gotten to ask him questions yet. He has yet to hold up a Celtics jersey over at the Auerbach Center. Like, it's a little fishy to me. Like, what's going on in Boston a little bit? I still think there's a possibility that Anfernee Simons could be traded before the start of the season if the right deal comes along. Bobby Manning of CLNS, he disagreed with me a little bit. This was before the Boucher signing, so I don't know if that changes his feeling at all. But he said that the Niang trade should shed some massive tax relief for the Celtics, all that stuff. Regardless, the second half is what matters here. He says that this increases, by his sense, the likelihood that Anfernee Simons plays out most of the season in Boston. Now, does that mean he plays all of the season in Boston? I would still think that Bobby would believe no, that the Celtics probably get something done closer to the trade deadline. But I would say that it's unlikely that he gets traded before the season, probably, because there isn't that much market for Anfernee Simons at this point. Jay King, Celtics reporter at The Athletic, said this. At this point, I don't think it's a matter of how much capital the Celtics would have to get for trading Simons. It's a matter of how much draft capital they would have to give up. And he doesn't seem to have a strong market at this point. Now, what we know about Brad Stevens and the way he's been running this organization and the way that he's kind of running this retool around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the gap year is that he doesn't want to give up picks to go and shed these big salaries. He didn't have to do it to go and trade for Drew Holiday. As a matter of fact, he originally got 2 draft picks before Drew Holiday's medicals weren't the best by Portland. And then Porzingis, I think he gave up 2 seconds, but like, who cares at that point? You have the ammo to be able to do it. You've made deals over the past couple of years that have given you big-time second-round draft pick ammo. So if you need to get off of those these big-time contracts and attach capital, you can do it with second-round picks. But we know that he doesn't want to do that, so he's going to probably try to build up Anfernee Simons a little bit. Like, the tax penalties don't lock in until the trade deadline when you can't make any more moves off of your roster. You can't shed any more big-time salaries after that. So how about Brad Stevens sees what he can get in Anfernee Simons, what Joe Mazzulla can do with him, a player who's a super high volume three-point shooter, very high efficiency as well, twitchy athlete, can space the floor and get downhill. Why don't you see what you have in a winning situation, or at least a winning culture with him first, before you trade him for, I guess, pennies on the dollar? Like, he wasn't super highly valued by Portland, and I don't think he's super highly valued around the league right now. Get him in a winning situation. Get him playing alongside Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown, guys who know how to play the game the right way and play defense. And then, his stock is probably up a little bit, or at least up from what it is now by the time the trade deadline rolls around, and the Celtics can get off a little bit more money. And there's no pressure at this point. Like, with the penalties not locking in until the end of the season, like, what's the use in trading Anfernee Simons at this point right now? You're going to need some scoring on this roster next year. You lost, 30 points worth of scoring in this offseason. You're going to need somebody to replicate that. And then if you take into account Tatum's injury, you lose 60 points of scoring this offseason. So somebody's going to need to put the ball in the basket. Anfernee Simons is more likely going to be necessary for the Celtics team to not be in the bottom of the lottery this year rather than make the playoffs. So there's no pressure on the C's to trade him at this point. But if the right deal comes along before the season and the Celtics can shed enough money to get under the tax entirely, I think Brad's going to take that move because there's no telling you'll see that same kind of deal once the season begins. So there's no pressure to do it right now, but if the right deal comes along, Brad's going to go out there and do it. He works in the shadows. What do you guys think? Will Anfernee Simons play a full season in Boston? Will he end up being traded before the season's end, before the deadline? Yes or no? You guys let me know. Predict it for me down in the comment section. Will Simons play a full season with the Boston Celtics? Next, before we get out of here on today's show, we're going to get to know the new signing a little bit. Chris Boucher, got a couple more details on him and some Celtics history that some fans might be entertained by. And then two-way drama with the way that the Celtics traded for R.J. Lewis yesterday. Did they kick one of their guys to the curb? They took in the 2025 draft. All that and more in just a second. But get hooked up first with this awesome deal with our friends at chatsports.com/champ sale. A caricature shirt of the 2024 championship run. Like, this thing's on a massive sale. It's $13 because these guys aren't on the team anymore. But these guys are Celtics for life, in my opinion. And I got myself one of these shirts. You guys can too at this link right here. Massive discount. It was $38. Now it's $13. It's like 67% off. Unheard of deals at this link. Chatsports.com/champ sale. Don't worry though. I put it in the comment section and description of today's video to make it easy for you guys. Go get yourself, commemorate the good times with the 2024, of course, champ shirt today. All right, let's get to know Chris Boucher a little bit here, who has been in the league for not that long, but he is 32 years old. Came into the league as an established veteran collegiate player out of Oregon. He was part of some of the most fun college teams that I've ever watched. Was a teammate of Peyton Pritchard back in 2016. Was on those teams with Dylan Brooks and Tyler Dorsey, and eventually Jordan Bell came along. Like, those Oregon teams were really, really fun. And now he's been in the league for 8 seasons now, and he's been on the Raptors pretty much the entire time. Spent his first year with the Golden State Warriors, but ever since then, he's been with Toronto, won the 2019 NBA Finals with them, so he is an NBA champion, and he's actually the last member of that roster that was still with Toronto. Now there's nobody left from that 2019 title squad. He also leads Toronto all-time in points, rebounds, blocks, and three-pointers made, off of the bench, of course. And then Shams Charania, when the trade was made in that tweet, I just wanted to include that here, is that he's probably going to play a major role in Boston's front court, which we know is thin and we'll look at in just a moment. But I wanted to kick it back to this. By the way, Chris Boucher, Brad Stevens, loves doing this. Loves making deals for players that have whooped his ass before. 30 points in 35 minutes back in 2021 when he came to the TD Garden. And this is another memory of the TD Garden back a couple of seasons ago where Chris Boucher may or may not have bumped or intentionally bumped Joe Mazzulla walking back to the huddle after a timeout. And Joe Mazzulla did not take very lightly to that. He went after Chris Boucher and had to be held back by the Time Lord there. So I'm sure when Chris Boucher walks into the Celtics Arabax Center, the clubhouse, that this video will be playing on multiple screens as he walks in, as Joe Mazzulla loves to play mind games like that. But I'm excited for Chris Boucher, man. He's going to be definitely a contributor. Had a really good season last year. Spaces the floor. Averaged 10 and 5. Like, I think he's going to be a contributor, and has been a guy who's been very available throughout his NBA career. Now the Celtics front court, like, it looks a little bit better because I'm way more comfortable having Boucher down low than I am with Georges Niang at the 4 or the 5. And I mean, if George Niang's at the 5, we got bigger issues to talk about. But you got Neemias Queta, who's probably going to be your starting center. Luka Garza, first center off the bench. Is Xavier Tillman going to have working knees this season? Who knows if that's the case. And Amari Williams, he's there. And we'll talk about Amari in just a second. But Boucher will probably either be starting at your 4 or maybe sometimes your 5 if you want to go small ball there. But Amari Williams, he didn't play much in Summer League, and he is not currently signed to a two-way deal that was not promised but assumed to be taken up by him. Now you went out there and traded for R.J. Lewis Jr. You only signed one of your 2 second-round picks to a two-way contract in Max Shulga, and then Miles Norris is hanging around as well. He was a big-time contributor for their Summer League squad. And Amari Williams isn't here, so our Celtics fans wondering, like, is he a part of this roster anymore? Can he go sign somewhere else? Hold your horses, calm down a little bit. That's not the case. Shout out to my guy Keith Smith, who came in with this. He said Boston controls Amari Williams' draft rights. He cannot sign with another team, and the Celtics could sign him to a standard roster spot or a two-way roster spot, but right now there aren't any two-way spots open. Mostly, there is no rush to do anything right now. The Celtics roster shuffling probably isn't done. So for those of you who are hanging around here at the end of today's show, Keith Smith knows better than a lot of guys too. The Celtics roster is probably incomplete before the trade deadline will roll around. We're going to see more moves in the coming weeks and months. We'll keep you guys updated on all those moves as well. That's why you subscribe to the channel. Hit that big red sub button for the best Celtics content all offseason long and into training camp and into the preseason, into the regular season and postseason as well. Lock us in, hit that subscribe button. We'll see you guys all in the next one. And as always, let's go C's.